And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis, and next to me, as always, is my beautiful co-host Laraib. As we are super excited to talk about the freaking Super Bowl this Sunday. We have a jam-packed episode of matchups, of betting props, of who we're picking. So much to talk about this individual game. Obviously, it's the highlight of every football player, every football fan, all of our careers. This is absolutely the pinnacle of the sports world. Everyone who's anyone will be watching the game in America. It's truly one of the greatest sports moments in the entire world. And we're honored to be able to cover it for all of you loyal fans. I don't know what else more to say. Laraib, you ready to hop into this?
Yeah, of course, we both wish our teams could be here in this game, Lewis, but unfortunately not this year. Lewis, let's go ahead and kick it off. Let's
Hey,
start off
Derek
with this
Carr.
Eagles. Let's start off with this Eagles offense, Lewis. And now this team is completely transformed from the past couple of seasons from with what they had with Carson Wentz, now with Jalen Hurts. And what's really stood out to me this year, Lewis, has been their aggression. Maybe it's just that Philly mentality, but they've been so aggressive this year, Lewis. On their first drive against the 49ers, you saw them go for it on fourth down. And that's what's been this team's identity all year long. And it starts with that offensive line, right? The best unit in the NFL, hands down. And that rushing attack, it just makes this team so diverse, Lewis. And of course, when they bring in A.J. Brown in the offseason, it just transformed this team. And now offensively, they're going to be matched up against this Chiefs defense, who, Chris Jones and that defensive line have the second most sacks this year in the league. So they're going to have to exploit some of that. They don't do a lot of pre-snap motion, Lewis, but if they can, get this defense moving one side or other and try to exploit through some play action games, because they have weapons all across the field. Even on the running backs, if someone goes down, they got three really solid running backs, and Kenneth Gainwell, Boston Scott, and of course, Miles Sanders. And one of those guys was in their last Super Bowl. A lot of this offensive line, Lewis, was also in the last Super Bowl. And so I feel really good about this Eagles offense matching up against the Chiefs secondary as well, Lewis. We saw a couple of guys get banged up against the Bengals. Of course, L'Jarius Sneed goes down, and they have to rely on rookies like Justin Watson and two other rookies that they have as well, Lewis, in the secondary. So I think the Eagles, it's going to be about exploiting the matchup. And, of course, the big thing, what they've done all year long is keep that aggression and keep running the ball. And I think, against the Chiefs defense, they've been a little underrated. Of course, they had the second most sacks this year at 55, but I think the Eagles' offensive line can control this game.
Yeah, I mean, it really all depends on how successful this running game can be for the Eagles and how the game script kind of dictates what this offense is going to do. We haven't seen the Eagles down with Jalen Hurts as quarterback in a lot of games this season, so they haven't been able to face this, high-scoring game that some people think it's going to be for this Super Bowl. So how will they fare? Well, for starters, like you mentioned, the Eagles' offensive line, I agree with you, is probably the best unit of any unit in the entire NFL, certainly in this game. Just how cohesive they are. They have great depth as well, guys coming off the bench who are still really good offensive line, substitutes. We saw Lane Johnson kind of retore his groin in the NFC Championship last week, but it seems like he will play. And, when he's on the field, he's undoubtedly their best offensive lineman, and that's saying a lot when you have guys like Kelsey and Mailata on the offensive line as well, who are, no slouches in their own right. So, but he completely transforms what they're able to do, especially against, like you mentioned, a really good Chiefs pass rush. So they need to be able to run the ball. And the biggest key to running the ball for this Eagles team is Jalen Hurts. He really unlocks what they do offensively. They're last in the league in pre-snap motion. You know why that is, Laurent? Because they're so good at doing what they do that it's the only thing you can do is try to stop it. And they don't think you can, and they'll let you try to do whatever you can to stop, especially that, they have the ultimate weapon on those 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, 4th and inches, just that quarterback push. No one's been able to stop all year. A 96% success rate whenever they've attempted it. And if they attempt it once, it doesn't work, they'll attempt it again, and it will work. It's just the relentless, like you said, attitude of this Philly team that they just believe they are stronger, they're more physical, and they will outwill their opponents, which definitely does give them the edge. And like you mentioned, the weapons on the outside, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith have been very impressive. And they will get good matchups. I want to highlight, especially, we'll talk about this guy who I like a lot for my best bets, but Dallas Goedert, since returning, has been a huge weapon for this offense. He's been really good all season. So, especially if it's a close game, it feels like Jalen Hurts targets Goddard a lot more, just those easy completions over the middle. He's a real physical guy who can break through tackles and get in spots like in the red zone, be very effective. So maybe a Goddard touchdown is in play in this game as well. We'll get into some of the props we like. I do like Goddard's over yards, but we'll get into that later. But potential touchdown, I think he's going to get a heavy workload in this game. So that's something to look out for this Eagles offense. But I want to flip it over to this Chiefs defense, Laura. This Chiefs defense, like you mentioned, second in the league in sacks. They held the Bengals to 20 points in the AFC Championship game last week. They did have a banged up offensive line, but to see just the amount of pressure they got in Joe Burrow, that really rattled him. And they had a good running game. We saw what they did against the Bills the week prior, the Bengals. They ran the ball extremely well, and they could not run the ball whatsoever against this Chiefs team, who has a really underrated front seven. You always talk about Chris Jones. He's the stalwart. He's the all-pro. Some saying with Aaron Donald kind of on the decline, he is the premier defensive tackle in the sport, and I wouldn't disagree with you if you made that argument. But that's only a part of what their offense entails. Frank Clark, like I mentioned last week, he is now third in the NFL all time in postseason sacks, which shows he gets up in these big moments, and he plays huge for this Chiefs team. As you know, your former boy Frank Clark, he plays big in these big moments, so you always expect that out of him. But also, the thing that you said about the rookies on this defense, they're not rookies anymore. They've played almost 20 games in the NFL. They have experience. They have reps under their belt to where they're almost veterans at this point when they're going through a full season, seeing every type of offense you can see. And they played very well considering the circumstances against Cincinnati last week, against definitely a better receiving core than you have here in Philadelphia. It is arguable Philadelphia is still really good, but I'll take Chase and Higgins over Smith and Brown any day of the week. So, and I think, you mentioned L'Jarius Sneed went down in the game with concussion, but he had cleared concussion protocol this week, and he is expected to play. So that's a huge addition for this offense, or for this defense in this game. So I think they will be effective. It just, can you stop the run? We saw they limited the Bengals offense in terms of rushing last week, but they did give up some really bad, third and longs, allowing Joe Burrow to just kind of stay in the pocket. So you're facing an entirely different animal with this Eagles rushing game. If you can stop the run, or just, maybe just red zone, really hunker down, make Jalen Hurts throw tight window passes, you can be successful holding this Eagles team to 3 instead of 7, which the Eagles opt, honestly, to do more of than, that we give the Eagles credit for being this really risk-taking team, but they're actually league average and, red zone field goal percentage. So it really doesn't, you can hold them to 3 points when you trust your offense to go get 7, and we'll get to them in a second. But this is a vastly underrated Chiefs defense, which I do think will play a big game. I don't think this Eagles offense is just going to run it up all and down the field on this Chiefs defense, especially with the time to prepare. We know Steve Spagnuolo, he's extremely blitz happy. He's extremely aggressive. He will dial up things for Jalen Hurts. And if this is a game where it's high scoring and the Eagles have to come back, or they have to be in a passing situation, he will send a blitz and it will get tight. And people are going to get nervous down in the fourth quarter. And when Spags sends Justin Reed off a safety blitz, it might get interesting, Laraib. It might get interesting, Jim. But that's my take on the Chiefs defense. What do you think, Laura?
Yeah, I have to agree with you on everything you said about the defense, right? Of course, the front seven is a big thing, but the secondary, they brought in guys like Justin Reed, former Houston Texan, to help, lock up a little bit of that secondary. And with L'Jarius Sneed back in this one, he's going to be, really, really solid for them. But the big thing that you mentioned, Lewis, is Steve Spags, their defensive coordinator, who a lot of people don't give a lot of credit to, but his adjustments at halftime, Lewis, is going to be a big team for what this, for how far this Kansas City team is going to go in the Super Bowl. If you think back to when they played against the 49ers, Lewis, 2 or a couple of years ago in the Super Bowl that they won, it was his adjustments in that one that really slowed down the 49ers, who were up 20-10 and didn't score another point, after the, midway through the third quarter. So his adjustments in this one against the Eagles Of course, we know they're going to really like to run the ball. The Eagles will, but it's going to be his adjustments. Are they going to be able to stop some of those, option quarterback option runs, just having rushing attack, Lewis. And, it's going to be a great battle to see between this Chiefs defense and Eagles offense. So let's talk about this Eagles defense a little bit now. Now you talk about a unit who is not, underrated. This is the top units at the top of their game. That front seven for the Eagles, of course, with Hassan Reddick, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham. A lot of those guys were there for the Super Bowl last time they won, Lewis, and now they're here ready to win another one. And it's going to be them against that, Chiefs offensive line, who's been much improved from when the Chiefs lost that last Super Bowl against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But I think it's going to be some of that same success if they can recreate some of that, what Tampa Bay did against the Chiefs last time, then I think the Eagles have a good shot in this one. Now, of course, your secondary is a little overrated, Lewis. I think you'll agree with me. Of course, when you have that front seven getting on quarterbacks all game long, of course, it's going to make you look really good. But, guys like Darius Slay, James Bradbury, and, of course, former Saints Chauncey Gardner-Johnson are not, scrubs, Lewis. I like all of them in any matchup against any of those Chiefs receivers, Lewis. You put any one of those one-on-one, I like the Eagles guys, except for one guy, and it, of course, is Travis Kelce. Now, they're going to have this handfuls with him all game long. We've talked about this a little bit before, Lewis. The one thing that's lacking for this Eagles defense is their linebackers, of course. They like to bring guys onto the line, but their linebackers in coverage, Lewis, just aren't that great, in my opinion. So it's going to take to some of those nickel cornerbacks, guys like maybe Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, to double Travis Kelce. And I think if they double Kelce, of course, everyone likes to say this, double Kelce and leave everybody else open. Of course, the other guy that they usually left open or one-on-one was Tyreek Hill, but he's no longer there, Lewis. Now it's guys like Juju Smith-Schuster and MVS to take up that spot. And so I think for this Eagles defense, maybe even triple Travis Kelce and let all those other guys, try to see what they can do. But I think Darius Slay one-on-one with MVS, I'm taking Slay. James Bradbury one-on-one versus Juju Smith-Schuster, I'm taking James Bradbury, Lewis.
Well, the big conversation going into this one was, were these extra receivers even going to be able to play? Juju got injured in that Cincy game. Mecole Hardman was injured. Now, he's on IR, so he's definitely not playing. And then someone else was kind of banged up. Oh, Kadarius Toney, who was also banged up in that Cincinnati game. Good news for the Chiefs is Juju and Toney are both practicing, so they should be able to play in the Super Bowl, which is huge, especially when you talk about, the Eagles have the personnel where you have veteran corners like James Bradbury and Darius Slay, to where you can trust them one-on-one against kind of middling receivers and just throw everything you have at Travis Kelce and hope that's a great game plan. But let's get into this Eagles defense for a second. Obviously, an extremely formidable front four. That defensive line honestly kind of mirrors what they had in 2017, which made them so successful. You still have big Fletcher Cox in the middle, but you also bring in rookie Jordan Davis, who's been a really good run stopper this year. And then on the edge, Hassan Reddick, Josh Sweat have just been so huge for you this season, leading, really making you the team that led the league in sacks this year. But in this game, I think the Chiefs' offensive line is vastly underrated. They have so many just really good guys. Joe Thuney, who I think is probably the best guard in the NFL. You have Creed Humphrey, who's arguably the best guard or center in the NFL, maybe right behind Kelce on the other side of the ball. And then you have, the tackles. That's the biggest concern for me, because I think the right tackle, I forget his name at the moment, he's solid. He's not great, but he's solid. Orlando Brown, the left tackle, is the one who scares me. I think one of the biggest matchups in this game is going to be Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat against Orlando Brown in space, because Patrick Mahomes, yes, we believe he's going to be closer to 100% than he was in the Cincinnati game, but this Eagles defense is better than that Bengals defense. Not much, but they are better, especially rushing the passer. And this Chiefs offense hasn't really faced a defense kind of like this Eagles front seven in a long time, especially not in the AFC. So it's going to be a completely different test, kind of similar to the Bills game they played earlier in the season when Von Miller got an Orlando Brown one-on-one late in the game, and he wrecked the game. Obviously, Von Miller got injured and derailed the Bills season, but you can also make the argument, and a lot of people are making this online, it's very compelling. This Eagles defense has faced nothing like Patrick Mahomes all season. And, I placed a bet before the season that the Eagles would finish with the best regular season record. And I liked the bet a lot, obviously. It did hit. But it didn't hit all the way, but whatever. Um, Thanks, Chiefs. But the thing is, the best quarterbacks they faced all year were Dak, Trevor Lawrence, and that was a complete like weird rainstorm type game. Aaron Rodgers and Jared Goff. Those are the four best quarterbacks they played all season. And in those games, Laraib, if you remember, Jared Goff put up 35 points. Aaron Rodgers put up 33 points. Dak Prescott put up 40 points. Trevor Lawrence put up 16 points. However, he fumbled the ball 5 times in that game. So you take it with a grain of salt, I guess. Now you could say, oh, they played Kirk Cousins and held him to 7 points. It was Monday Night Football in week 2. What do you think Kirk Cousins was going to do? Anywho, and we saw, Kirk Cousins, right? But and that's why you talk about how I get to the secondary of this Eagles team. I think they're extremely gettable. The linebackers and safeties for this Eagles team are not good in coverage. Marcus Epps, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, TJ Edwards. The linebackers are just really small. They're fast, but keeping up with a guy like Travis Kelce is going to be an impossible task because, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, he's had a bunch of picks this season. He's a really, hard-nosed, kind of Jamal Adams-esque box safety, but in coverage, one-on-one in space, he gets cooked. As a longtime Saints fan, and I love Chauncey. This isn't just me being salty and saying this. I said this when he was a Saint. There's a lot of opportunities. He's a big playmaker, but he's like a knockout puncher. He can hit you with the knockout, but if he misses that knockout punch, he will be burned for it. And that will happen against this calculated Chiefs Andy Reid offense. So I want to focus now to this Andy Reid offense. Andy Reid, who is 21-6, coming off more than 10 days of rest, and that's the case this week, obviously. Going up against his former team, not really a lot of the staff there that he put in there, but some of the guys he drafted are still on the roster, and Kelce, Johnson, and I think he drafted Fletcher Cox. I'm not too sure, but I think those are the last 3 guys that he actually drafted that are still on the roster. So, but this is a big game for the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes has faced so many great defenses this season. He knows what to expect, and it's hard just to not bet with Mahomes in a game like this because he is the best quarterback on the field. And you could say, yes, the Eagles have better, this position group, but he is the ultimate equalizer. And in a game where you have 2 weeks of rest, 2 weeks of focus, and you have Andy Reid calling the plays, it's hard not to bet on Mahomes. And you could say, oh, this pass rush, it could be similar to the 2020 Super Bowl, but that game was completely different. Mahomes had completely new offensive linemen. He was down 3 offensive linemen from the game before. So it was just a completely unfamiliar new group, and he was assaulted all night. But even you could say, Laraib, during that game, he was still making insane throws on the run, improvisation like crazy, and guys are just dropping passes. Obviously, there was an infamous pass Clyde Edwards-Helaire dropped in the red zone. I think Tyreek dropped one, and it was just a really bad game for the offense in general. And that Tampa Bay defensive front, I would argue, is better than this Eagles defensive front, especially the secondaries are completely different in that regard. So I think this, and also we saw from that Chiefs offense, they really struggled with that cover 2 deep safety look that he was getting. And then the next season, he got a lot of it. And Mahomes was kind of, he was rattled by it, but then he figured it out. He took the things underneath. You lose Tyreek Hill, and it just seems like he's kind of conquered this offense, leading the league in scoring again. And he just makes guys better. In the underneath game, he can pick you apart. We see with the underneath stuff to Pacheco, to Mecole Hardman, not Mecole Hardman, to MVS, and he can still beat you over the top. And they use Kelce in so many creative ways that, yes, this Eagles defense has been really good, but they have not faced a powerhouse offense like the Chiefs at all this entire season. So if they get blitzed 14-0 out of the gate, that wouldn't shock me. But, this game could go one or two ways, and I think it'll be dictated on the first drive. Excuse me. If the Eagles can get a significant pass rush, and you can see it immediately, like, oh, Patrick Mahomes, he's being hurried. He might even get sacked in the first drive. That will spell doom for the Chiefs in this game. But if the Chiefs go down the field and score on the first drive, it'll spell doom for the Eagles. So things could get out of hand either way. And if I had to bet on one guy, I would bet on Patrick Mahomes.
Well, Lewis, he wasn't your homie when he lost to the Buccaneers last time. And
No.
I feel like he clearly showed which way you're leaning in this one,
I don't
Lewis.
know, Jim.
When, let's talk about this. We'll continue to talk about the Chiefs a little bit. Of course, it's going to come down to him, Patrick Mahomes, and Travis Kelce. Like you mentioned, of course, even without Tyreek Hill this year, their offense was the number one scoring offense in the league. And that really came down to Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. And like when we're talking about the Eagles, linebackers, they can be easily exploited, along with the secondary, can be easily exploited. So it's going to take some effort from guys like MVS and Sky Moore to really stretch the field and let Travis Kelce do all his work in the intermediate. And the Chiefs very well can dominate this game, on offense all across the board, Lewis. But I think that this Eagles front seven is coming to play in this one, and they rattle Mahomes, who's been banged up on that ankle. Didn't look too bad against the Bengals. And 2 weeks rest, maybe he's close to 100%. But this Eagles defense is going to do whatever they can to exploit him in all different sorts of ways, Lewis. And it's going to be Andy Reid and his creativity on the offensive side of the ball, really drawing up plays to get some of the pressure off of Kelce and to get the ball into some other playmakers. But I think that Nick Sirianni and this Philly team,
underrated coach of the year, baby,
got something to prove. I like the Eagles in this one, Lewis.
Well, I guess you tipped your hat, Laraib. I think the matchup will be Jonathan Gannon and this Eagles defense against Andy Reid and the Chiefs offense, obviously. And it obviously, like I said, if the script is like how you predict and like how it was in 2020, then this will be a really tough ball game for this Kansas City Chiefs club. But I think that, given Mahomes' experience, given like how he's kind of developed his game in the past few years, this is just a really good spot for him against not that great of a defense, honestly. I don't think they're better than the Ravens defense. I don't think they're better than the 49ers defense. I think they are more on par with the Cincinnati defense we've seen of late. And that Cincinnati defense, they knew Mahomes like a book, and they still couldn't stop him, given some calls here and there. But, it's the Super Bowl. You think they're not going to give Mahomes calls? Are you kidding me? So before we hop into our official picks and scores, I want to go over some Super Bowl prop bets that we both really like. We picked 3 of our own, and we might throw some more off each other based off our discussion. But I'm going to start it off here. Mahomes, I've talked about how much I like him in this game. I think the ankle is going to be really good. He said that he didn't get a shot in his ankle, like a pain relieving shot, because he worried about if he did win the game, how he might re-injure it and not feel pain and do something risky that would injure him further going into the Super Bowl. But there's no game past the Super Bowl. This is it. You got a full offseason. You got months to recuperate. He's putting Novocaine. He's putting every drug you can think of in that dang ankle, and he's going to be looking like Superman on the field. So I think over 19.5 rushing yards. You see in all these huge games, he has a huge scramble, a clutch scramble. Now, the thing that scares me that we talked about earlier is a potential kneel down situation, which a lot of bettors remember in the Super Bowl against the 49ers. He had negative 18 yards rushing just from kneel downs late in the game. So you really don't want that to happen. But I don't think this game will call for that much of kneel downs. At least I'm hoping. So I do like Mahomes over 19.5 rushing yards in this game, Laraib.
Yeah, that's a really good bet, Lewis. So I got another good one for you right here. This is my favorite bet. Travis Kelce, anytime touchdown, plus Travis Kelce, 50 receiving yards. Like you mentioned, of course, it's been Patrick Mahomes and Kelce all season long. And if they're going to win this Super Bowl, it's going to be off the backs of Travis Kelce. And so 50 receiving yards, really, Lewis, is not that much for him. And of course, there's a receiving touchdown. They have all sorts of creative play calls once they get down there within the 10-yard line, within the 20-yard line. If you parlay those two together, you get plus 109. I think that's really solid odds to double your money on something that, is almost guaranteed in this Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of tight ends, I really like that. But I also like Dallas Goedert on the other side of the ball, like I was alluding to earlier. Over 50 yards in this game. Close game that he's probably going to be passing a lot. Dallas Goedert against this Chiefs secondary, I think is a good bet. Obviously, Jalen Hurts likes his deep shots to A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. But, you need those just chunk plays, those quick first downs, those 7-8 yard hitters. And Dallas Goedert could potentially turn those 7-8 yard hitters into 15-yard gains as we've seen him do all season. So I like him to go over his listed number at 50 or at 49.5. So if Goddard gets 50 more yards, you are golden in this game.
Yeah, that's a good one for sure, Lewis. But I got another good one for you right here. Miles Sanders, anytime touchdown. The odds for that are plus 120. Like you mentioned, the Eagles team has been really aggressive all year long, Lewis, and it's been through that rushing attack. And now Miles Sanders to get a touchdown at any time in the point in the game, Lewis, I think that's a really good bet. Of course, he had a big one in the opening drive against the 49ers, who have a really, really solid run defense. And now you're facing the Chiefs team in the Super Bowl. I think they rely on the run game heavy, and Miles Sanders gets a touchdown.
I want to throw some honorable mention bets that I've been thinking about since we've started filming. Jalen Hurts anytime touchdown. If they get in those situations where it's first and goal on the 1 yard line, third and goal on the 1 yard line, they love to just punch it in with him. And it's going to be a huge game where he knows he has to rely on himself and he's going to put it all out there. So if he's in the red zone, starts to scramble, he's going to put his body on the line, reach, take a hit, whatever he needs to do, and he will try to score in this game. So I like that one. I also like Jalen Hurts over rushing yards. But the big prop that I wanted to highlight here is the under in this ball game. The line is listed at 50.5. I just think it's going to be a low-scoring game. We talked about how good the defenses were, how underrated the Chiefs defense is, and how properly rated this Eagles defense is. And if this game becomes a rock'em sock'em, defensive battle, it really could be. And we see a lot of Super Bowls usually end up following that type of script. There's not a lot of high-scoring Super Bowls that we normally see, unless it's an insane blowout, i.e. Seahawks, Broncos.
Ooh.
So I think this is how this game is going to go. I have it under 50 for my personal score, so I think that's a good bet.
Yeah, and Lewis, honorable mention that I have as well. If you like either one of these teams to win the Super Bowl, Lewis, I think we can agree whichever team wins, the quarterback will be the MVP for either team.
Yep.
So if you like, Kansas City to win, go ahead and pick Patrick Mahomes as the Super Bowl MVP because you can get better odds on that than picking, either team to just flat out win the Super Bowl. Also, Jalen Hurts, I think, is around 160. So if you like the Eagles to win, I think Jalen Hurts will win MVP. And so that's better than getting the minus odds for money line and getting Jalen Hurts at plus, around 160 for the MVP.
1,000%, Laraib. All right. It's the moment everyone's been waiting for, the culmination of this season. Now, just to give a brief overview of what the picks are looking like, I have a 1-game lead heading into the Super Bowl, Laraib. And I didn't even bring this up to you, but I'm going to vote that the Super Bowl is worth 2 points, Laraib. You didn't know this going in, but I made the decision earlier this week. The Super Bowl is worth 2 points, as it should be. It's the biggest game all season. I just wanted to make sure you were picking a different team than I was, so you better not flake on me now. But that is worth 2 points, so one of us will be walking out of here champion. We will not be tying in this game. And the team I will be picking, as I have the 1-point lead, will be picking the Kansas City Chiefs with a score of 24-20. I know Chiefs fans recognize that score. It's the same score they had when they beat the 49ers. I think it's going to be following the same script. That means it'll be a 44 total points scored in the game, which means under 50.5. I just think with Mahomes' experience, with Andy Reid's experience off of buys, this Eagles team, they were here 5 years ago, but this is a completely new cast of characters. I think this Chiefs team is battle tested. They've been in every single moment. They've placed almost every single defense. They will be ready for this game, and I like a lot of the matchups favoring the Chiefs in this ball game, especially when it comes to the passing offense, which is the biggest strength of this Chiefs team. So give me the Kansas City Chiefs to win Super Bowl 57. I think that's what this is.
And for my pick of Super Bowl 57, I am selecting the Philadelphia Eagles 24-23. I really like this team, Lewis. They've been dominating all season long. Jalen Hurts only lost 1 game this season, Lewis. I believe that positional advantages all across the board against this Kansas City team. This has been Philly's year, Lewis. Just a different atmosphere for them. Just a different sort of just anger that they've had, Lewis. Just aggressiveness that they've had all season long. I think Nick Sirianni gets his first Super Bowl win as a head coach. and wins Coach of the Year on Thursday at the NFL Awards. Lewis, I'm be predicting a score of 24-23. And one final bet, I forgot to add this one, is both teams to complete their first pass. Of course, in the Super Bowl, offenses are going to try to get things clicking very, very early. Some short dump offs, some really nice short throws to your guys, Travis Kelce and Dallas Goedert. And that's at -105, Lewis. So I think that's really good value.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for our Super Bowl super special. It is Super Bowl 57, by the way. But that will do it for our Super Bowl 57 breakdown. If you like any of our props, if you like some of the stuff we've been doing all season, we will be filming an instant reaction episode following the Super Bowl. We'll try to do some NFL content throughout the year, but we'll talk about more of that in our reactions episode and our season wrap-up episode that we're going to be doing later next week. So if you have any other questions, comments, leave them down below with all of our socials and our links below to give you updates for the show. Laraib, anything you want to say before we head out?
No, we just want to say enjoy the Super Bowl. And this is the First and Goal podcast signing off.
Peace.